And good evening. Welcome back. My name is Ryan Belmore. I'm the founder and publisher of the Alexandria Brief. And tonight we are hosting conversations with Democratic candidates for House District 5, which is hosting a firehouse primary on Tuesday. If you're wondering if you live in that district, it is all in Alexandria, but it is not all of Alexandria. Best place to go is alexdems.org. And then they have this fancy link on there, or you can remember this link, who'smy.virginiageneralassembly.gov, to find out where you live. It will be the same polling places as last Tuesday, but it is a little bit different it is a lot different than last week because it does not include all of Alexandria. And again, Tuesday is election day. We have 4 Democrats who will be on the ballot. The winner of that, or the nominee, will move on to a February 10th special election versus a Republican candidate. And then they will resume the role around February 18th or so. Our final guest today, I think I've invited all Democratic candidates and all Republican candidates. The Republican candidate might come after Tuesday because there is not a primary. But our final guest, I think, for tonight is Chris Leibig. He's a criminal defense attorney who served at the Alexandria Public Defender's Office from 1996 to 2002 before launching a private practice in Old Town. And when Chris comes on, he can correct anything I may have gotten wrong. He's president-elect of the Virginia Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, and he has spent 20 years on NORML's legal committee advocating for marijuana reform and more. His platform emphasized criminal justice reform and labor rights, including repealing Virginia's right to work law and mental health system reform. He lives in Alexandria, obviously. Chris, did I get all of that right?
That was right. Thanks.
That's a good elevator speech.
You gave it well. When I give it, it's way too long.
Oh, okay. Well, for those who don't know you, what else would you add to that if you're trying to tell voters, constituents about yourself?
Well, so yeah, like you said, I started my career in 1996 as an Alexandria public defender, and it was the greatest work I've done. And I've continued to do a lot of court-appointed cases in private practice, but also primarily in my practice, I represent people that hire me. But, I would say I want to tell people why I'm running. I'm 55 years old. I live on Mount Vernon Avenue with my family. I've got a 1-month-old, a 3-month-old, a 3-year-old. I'm busy at work, just like everybody. But this year, I just really, looking at the national landscape and everything, the fact that our executive branch of the federal government is bringing out all this xenophobic nationalism, that it's working, that it's sticking, that the pushback isn't enough, that what I feel like so many things I'm proud of about this country are slipping away, that it's just not. And that's happening. It just made me think I want to take some of the things I've learned doing this and try to, to help out with this. So, as a defense attorney doing the kind of serious cases I do, and I spent years representing people back before the death penalty was abolished who were facing the death penalty. I do the very most serious kind of criminal cases in state and federal court, not just in Alexandria, but all over the state. And you develop a certain set of skills, which is that you are not afraid, that you're used to standing up to high odds, that you're used to not always having the popular position, and yet connecting with people, trying to learn how to show the humanity in your clients and everyone, and bringing people together to see often the solution is not locking people up and throwing away the key. Now, despite all the amazing justice reform that happened in 2021, a lot of which was because of our delegation, there's so much more to do. It's a national disgrace how many people are in jail. When you go into a courtroom, you're still seeing all the the people of color filling up the criminal courtroom, filling up the traffic courtroom. You're still seeing the same sentences for the most part, a lot of times under the Virginia sentencing guidelines, and it just takes so hard to change. You know what surprises me is that, or shocks me, is that most people you talk to do not disagree that there's way too many people in jail. But in every individual case, the system plays out anyway. Here's the guidelines. Here's our marching orders. The judge doesn't often want to go below the guidelines. The prosecutor doesn't either, because it's a political thing, and the train marches on. And so I just think that's one of the big issues. But really, what I've learned from that, I think, is how to fight with rhetoric, with wit, with knowledge of history, and with just general toughness in a way that could really help in this climate. I'm pretty sure I would be one of the most experienced criminal defense attorneys in the Virginia legislature. I think most people would agree with that. And I'll confess, I don't know the nuts and bolts of every political issue as it manifests in Virginia. One that I'm pretty well versed in for my whole life is unions. And like I've been known since I was a kid. My father was a labor lawyer. I was in a union household. We had union posters up. We knew that the wealth in this country comes from people working, and that's only, the disparity in the wealth has only gone up since then. The unions have been marginalized. Virginia's not good on them, and the wealth disparities and everything else are another big issue. And so that's another thing I would like to, hook up with the smart people in the legislature that are fighting for those issues and join that with whatever skills I could bring. I think
I'm wondering, with your background, and you speaking so deeply about criminal justice and incarceration, I'm just wondering if you could put it, why should every constituent care about fixing that system? Why should, everybody's talking about affordable housing and education, and in your experience and background, tell me how that all ties in.
Well, those things in a way are the same. The incarceration rate also in part comes from people that start out without equal opportunity. I mean, the mental health side of it, I could talk about for 3 hours. The percentage of people that you see in that courtroom getting sentenced that have untreated mental health conditions, and there's nowhere to go. And this applies to people of all wealth too. You could be a wealthy family, and if your son or daughter is bipolar and the medications aren't right and they keep getting arrested, they keep getting released from the commitments, nobody can solve it. So that's one side. Also, the equal opportunity that gives people a chance not to get into that rut in the first place, it all collapses together. Now, I will say this, and somebody might think that the criminal justice issue is just for people that are getting in trouble, right? Or maybe just for criminals. Okay, fine. But if you look at it from a deep historical context, that is the wrong way to think of it. The rights that are defined in these cases. The pushback against the executive is defined in these cases. And right now it's these people. But what are you seeing right now? I mean, the woman in Minneapolis that was gunned down, I don't think she had a criminal record. And those rights have been used, and they need to be employed all the time, everywhere, and not have any letdown. So, I mean, it really does affect everybody. I've represented so many people who are from a family that have never had any trouble. And what they usually say is something like this: wait a minute, but wait, I have no record. My son has no record. I'm not going to get a second chance. Why is that? Well, it's because of the vote, because politicians have told you that upping the sentences, making more crimes, brings down the crime rate. That's never been true. It's actually it's a complete sham ever since the 70s. Not one single moment has that been the case, that creating a mandatory minimum, upping a penalty made crime go down, and it's employed against everyone. So I think everyone should care about it, but not just out of compassion. In this environment, what are we seeing? I mean, since when, Ryan, would you have imagined that localities' rights, that states' rights was going to become a progressive issue? And yet that's where we are. We grew up with it as the opposite, but that's what's happening. is how can we push back on the federal law enforcement coming into communities where they don't belong. This is turning things on its head from 10 years ago, and I think that fight needs to be made, and it stems from the Constitution, which is the same set of rights that you employ defending a criminal case.
With all of that said, we may have gotten there, but let me just ask the question just in case. But what would be your top legislative priority or priorities? What's the first bill you'd want to work on when you get to Richmond? What does it mean for your constituents here in Alexandria?
Well, I mean, it's from the criminal justice side. The mandatory minimums, elimination of that is it's always been the top of the list. I have ideas for some ways that could improve the judiciary. I think that there's ways that you could modify and change the entire sentencing guideline structure. But I think right now, the issues that are big and that I care about too, and are really another part of defending our liberties against, the current administration, is affordability. Making it so that the people in this city can afford to live here, who work here. And it's very common. And this happens, I think, a lot with police officers, probably teachers and such. The people that are serving our community don't live here, right? Because the city's just more and more expensive. I remember when I was living and working in Old Town back in the early 2000s, you walk out on Royal Street outside my office, for 10 blocks, there was low-income housing. That was part of the fabric of the community. That place has been raised, and it's now expensive housing. And I see how that happened. But, and similarly, just rental units and such. There could be different rules about how many people can reside in a group house, or how much, or whether or not people can rent their basement, and all this kind of stuff. Try to find a rental for a young person or someone who's working at a restaurant, is not married, by themselves, within a mile of Old Town. Try to find a place to rent. It's not that easy. It shouldn't be that way.
So do you have, I know it's far out to think about specific legislation, but do you have any particular ideas of, things that you could push to address the housing crisis and help Alexandrians where it's struggling to be able to afford to live here?
Well, I know that one thing you could do is change the rules that concern whether people can use subleases or sub parts of their home for rentals. That's something that helps people afford their home, to be able to rent part of it to someone else, or rent something that's a side unit to it. And that helps both sides of that equation. I think that try every time that there's a new development, a new building, it doesn't have to be 750, it doesn't have to be $500,000, $750,000 condos. It could be a different kind of thing, which would still be lucrative. It would still help the economy, and yet people could afford it who don't have the very most lucrative jobs, So those are two things I could think of. When it comes to unions and collective bargaining, I could talk about that for a long time. But the long and short of it is that if you have unions, wages go up and benefits go up and security goes up. And that makes people more likely to want to get a mortgage, or more likely to move to an area that's closer to where they work. It's because of the security. Because even if you can come up with a rent this year, signing a lease, if you don't know what's going to happen next, can be stressful. So, other ways to drive up wages, of course, involve the minimum wage and such. But, I will confess that those issues, although I've thought about them a lot, I don't know, for example, what House bills have been introduced, when they've been defeated and such. My main expertise, if you will, would be on the criminal justice side.
Well, you mentioned, we talked a little bit about the incarceration rates, and I guess you also hit on the reforms that you would prioritize. But I guess, do you have any thoughts on supporting legislation that would ban localities from entering into 287G agreements with ICE and such?
Well, so right now, I know that the sheriff in Alexandria is in such an agreement, and I have lots of personal experience with this. My wife is a public defender right now. This is a group of people that are my friends that handle most of these cases in the city. So you know the way that plays out. A person gets arrested for trespassing or driving on a suspended license, and they get booked into the jail. Now, if anybody else, they get right back out and have a court date. Maybe they get their license back. Maybe they get a fine. Maybe they get a weekend in jail. But with the contracts you're talking about, they get frozen by ICE. Now, a lot of times that's not even on a judicial warrant. So one thing you could do is that the jail could not hold anyone unless it's on a judicial warrant instead of a courtesy hold, which is merely at the request of ICE. And there's no law that says that needs to be done. Now, I will say this, some of the pressure that comes upon the locality to do that is that the Alexandria jail has a federal contract and houses federal inmates. Half of my practice is defending people in federal court, and people that are in the federal court in the Eastern District of Virginia who are detained prior to trial or after are housed in the Alexandria jail. That's a contract, and I believe that there's pressure there to make that happen because of the current administration, making that pressure where the prior administration did not. So I'm not saying it's not complex, but I'm very familiar with not only the legal issues and the policy issues about this. I know so many individuals where this has happened, where you're in the courtroom or the public defenders are in the courtroom with somebody and they're like, this guy cannot do 1 day in jail or he's gone. And this guy's lived here for years, has a family, has a job, is part of this community. But if he goes through that door, he's gone. So I've seen it on a very human side, regularly strategized about how to avoid it. And, it would be something I really care about.
What's the easiest thing or the one thing that you as a delegate or that the legislator or the Senate or the House could do that would just improve something or anything? Maybe your background is obviously in the criminal justice system. What's something that they could do that would make the biggest impact the quickest?
The biggest impact I think you mean in general, but yeah. I don't know if you mean on the justice system.
Both. You can give me one of each if you want.
I'll give you one for the justice system that they do is selecting the correct judges. So the delegations in each locality have the authority and ability based on the way the procedures and traditions are to decide who the judges would be that sit in a certain locality. Not just in there, but then also there's the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court of Virginia. The General Assembly gets to make those decisions for the most part. Putting thought into who those people are, and meaning that they would be people that are thoughtful, that understand these issues, that think in a certain way, that reverberates for years. And you see it happen all the time when there's a poor choice. It hurts hundreds of people, thousands of people, and it's under the radar too, because not everybody's in those courts. That is something that's easy and that requires a lot of work. You got to think right about it to do it. And a lot of this stuff, sometimes it's political connections and everything. But once someone's up there, they are throwing down weight on people every single day and fast.
Wondering, you get down to Richmond, I think outside of our bubble here of Alexandria, many people may look up this way and say, Alexandria is all set. They don't need more funding for schools. They don't need this. They don't need that. Just wondering how you petition for some of that. The question I've been asking is school divisions across Northern Virginia say they're underfunded by the state. What do you do to increase state support for Alexandria City Public Schools? But I'm opening that up a little bit more of, how do you let people know that, it's not all rich people who live here. There are people who need help, and there are different communities and education and things like that.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. I think there can be an impression that Alexandria is basically full of white liberals who are rich, right? It's totally not true. I think a lot of people around the state know more than that about it. But in my practice, I do go all over the state. I have a big case in Virginia Beach, Buckingham County. I had a murder case in Abingdon, Virginia this year. I see a lot of people, and I'm good at connecting with people all over the place. I mean, I like doing that, and I like going places I don't know. But also, I don't know how you convey what you just said, which is the truth, that Alexandria also has a lot of diversity, that there are communities of all kinds of people that are struggling. There are people that they and their families up to a point in the past lived in the housing projects, that do not get enough services, that do not have that opportunity. We are a great city, but why does Fairfax County have 5 of the best schools in the whole country, right? And I love TC Williams, AC High School, and my niece went there. My kids are going to go there. But why isn't it one of the best schools? I think that's, and I don't claim to blame anyone for that, but these things are huge. And I think that if you go down to Richmond, it's a big city with its own set of problems that are bigger, and Norfolk and Virginia Beach, but most of the state, actually, we need the money more than a lot of places in the state. We have a big population. We have a very diverse population, and it's like a microcosm of a city. It's not a lot of places have everybody needs help, but I'm saying there's a way to sell Alexandria as it's like a city.
You touched on this, but I just want to go through it because I think there is another answer here. But 13,000 federal workers approximately live in Alexandria. Obviously, have faced uncertainty over the last year. Immigrant communities are worried about enforcement actions. Trans kids and their families are under attack. What can a state delegate do to protect these Alexandrians?
Well, on the point that you mentioned about really all the groups you just said, it goes back a little bit to the national rhetoric. It's the PR war, the hateful PR war about these topics, just needs to be pushed back on in a smart way. For example, people have people around the country, and certainly in Virginia, believing that the Democratic Party is grounded in nothing but wokeness and all this kind of stuff. And it's all just cherry-picked nonsense, because the party itself is about sensible policies that help people. But what are they doing? Demonizing federal workers, which, anybody that looks at it for a few minutes realizes that's BS. Or, the same way with immigrants, and the one that's been demonized the most are trans people. It's horrible, and it's part of this administration's entire thing, which is to attempt to get people on the bandwagon to demonize people for who they are and not what they do. And so now you asked me a practical question. How do you do something about that? I honestly don't know how to change the rhetoric except through the bully pulpit, through talking to people, through persuasion, and through pushing back hard on the nonsense. When people try to say, oh, the Democrats want all the kids to become trans at the public school out in Loudoun County, or this kind of stuff. It's just lies. But people buy into this, and it starts becoming national news. And so I just think there needs to be really hard pushback, like in a campaign. This isn't what's happening. What's happening is people are waking up to the fact that people need help, people need protection, and nobody's trying to change anyone else, Interestingly, on that point, and I think about this all the time, and it very well applies to immigration. Everybody of any political persuasion loves the immigrant that they know. And this is something that you have come up all the time. You see it in cases all the time. If you get them to connect with the individual, they're like, oh, this is an exception, right? This is because that's human nature. Mm-hmm. And I think the messages haven't been that clear, but that never fails. It's easy to demonize the group, but I think part of that is a PR thing. I don't know if bully pulpit is the right word, but speaking about it a lot.
Not to editorialize, but I think we just have to have people looking for facts and looking for the truth. That is beyond Democrat or Republican. We just need people actually going back to seeking what is true. Regardless because I could say we had a 30-minute conversation and it was 30-minute conversation, but people will come on and say, oh no, it was actually 45. It's just like, the sky isn't blue anymore. So,
and therefore no one knows what to believe. They believe what they want to, and you know.
yeah. Somebody just asked, going back to selection of judges, would you support moving to the nonpartisan court plan, Missouri plan, if you're familiar, election of judges or something else?
Well, so I'm not familiar with it exactly, but you used the term election. So I don't know if Missouri has elected judges. I'm against that. And the reason for that is if you bring a judging into a campaign, look around at how that works. Think about what the campaigns are going to be about. Pressure's too high. You're talking about sentences and judges on the bench thinking about the voters. So I'm against elected judges from the general public. But I also think there's a way to depoliticize the process and make it merit based, in particular because it's not going to the voters. It's not a popularity contest. But for example, you could have ways to gauge people's knowledge about criminal procedure, civil procedure, the rules of evidence, case law, and have those test scores, which could be developed by law professors around the Commonwealth. And if they wish to run, they can take that test, don't have to publicize the result unless they want to run, and put that out there, because that's a big thing. Another thing is that some way to encourage diligence, and I don't mean to put down judges in general or anyone in particular, but a judge should read everything about the case that they should have read before ruling on it. That doesn't happen. And so it's really a very personal, academic, character-driven thing. And I don't think it should be decided by voters, because you end up in a contest about who gives the worst sentences. But there's a way to change that process, and it would be to focus on merit and such, yes.
I may have given away this answer when I read your bio that I put together, but where do you stand on repealing Virginia's right to work law, and what would that mean for workers in Alexandria?
Well, so I'm 100% for repealing the right to work law. And the thing about the right to work law, and this is something I've known about my whole life, is that it's one of those well-branded laws, right to work. Who is against that? Now, when you read it on the face of it too, it looks kind of fair, right? It says that you can't have a shop which would require that you be in the union. But the effect of it is it doesn't necessarily destroy unions completely, but it deliberately cripples them to the point where they can't be effective to help people get a living wage and better benefits, because that means that you in such a place, either there's not going to be a union because they can't afford it, or you get the benefit of it without having to pay any dues. And therefore realize collective bargaining only recently even came into play in Virginia, but it has a big impact. And so I'd be for abolishing this for sure. That's a big issue of mine. Now, how does it affect Alexandria? The biggest employers in Virginia, I don't have them all memorized, but you have federal contractors, you have grocery stores, you have Walmart, you have Target, you have all these different employers, and it would change things, because if you form a union, the wages simply go up. That's just what happens. But also it's done in a bargaining sense. So it's not like government regulation, it's the bargaining process. When workers combine together and negotiate, it's not like they're above the employer, and it's not even like they're even. It's just more fair bargaining to come to a place that everybody can live with. Otherwise, it's like take it or leave it. People will take the low-paying job because they have to and be desperate for something else, not be able to afford where they want to live, and it goes on and on. Unions make the middle class. And so, as far as what specific employers employ Alexandrians the most, I confess to not knowing that, but collective bargaining affects public sector employees too. It affects garbage delivery, janitors, it affects teachers, it affects police officers and firemen, and other people that help the city.
This week was a big week with session starting on Wednesday, and Democrats have already advanced 4 constitutional amendments. Redistricting, reproductive freedom, voting rights, marriage equality. Any thoughts on the 4 amendments, as well as redistricting and how that might come up in April prior to the midterms?
Well, I'll start with redistricting. Not an expert on this, but I surmise that what's happening there is that we're pushing back in reaction to the redistricting that happens in other states. And that's a good thing, because what's happening is um, the MAGA coalition is attempting to take over the U.S. House of Representatives by redistricting in states that they think they can win. The only way to combat that, like in California, is to push back on it. On the other amendments, I don't know all four of them. You just named them. You mentioned one that would be about marriage equality. I don't even need to read that to know that I'm for that one. What were the other two, Ryan? I'm sorry.
Voting rights and reproductive freedom. I don't have all the language in front of me to read them to you. So.
Voting rights, I'd have to look at it because I don't know what's in it, but I think that likely because it's something that I would be for. I just don't know. I feel kind of like I shouldn't just say yes to it without having read it or know what it is. Now, when it comes, and then the fourth one, the reproductive rights. This is a no-brainer. I do have something to say about that issue, though. It's one that I've always strongly supported. I think there's an argument missing from that, and there has been for a very long time in the whole Roe v. Wade debate nationally, which is this. Some people are against abortion. Some of the times that is because of their religion, and you can't change someone's faith, But what I think a lot of people don't know is that Roe v. Wade was a criminal law. It wasn't about whether or not you are for or against the idea of having abortions. It's whether or not people should be locked up for it. And that is a easier sell. And that's I believe, something that could be brought both nationally and in a debate about this to voters if there's something on the ballot, which is this is what we're really talking about. You want to disapprove of abortion because it's your faith. You can't argue about someone with your faith unless it's not even the right thing to do. You can't change their mind, but that's different than locking people up. And a lot of people of faith wouldn't want to lock people up, but I think that's one way. That fronting that would be a good way to win the public opinion to the extent it's not already won on that point.
I just wanted to make sure I had it right, so I was double checking. And the voting rights one was automatic restoration of voting and other political rights. People have completed felony sentences instead of requiring the governor to sign off on individuals, a process that only Virginia carries out. And I'm just going to go through the other ones because I forgot about them. The marriage equality, replacing a 20-year-old ban on same-sex marriage that has not been enforced for over a decade. And redistricting, we already know about. And the other one was a fundamental right to reproductive care, including access to abortion, contraception, and fertility treatments.
Right. So the one that relates to gay rights is also a no-brainer. The opposite of that is nonsense. Going backwards on that is something that is really one of the travesties of this whole new political era, right? That battle should have been over. When it comes to the voting rights, I didn't even know that they were coming back at the felon part, but I'm glad of it. The entire reason convicted felons ever couldn't vote is based on the Jim Crow law. It's about disenfranchising people after Reconstruction. And, I'll tell you some felonies right now. You can get a felony for shoplifting over $1,000. There's people that are convicted felons for driving as a habitual offender, not even DUIs. I mean, there are so many different felonies that don't have any relation to anything. But even if it did, why would someone who committed a violent offense and served their time not be allowed to vote? I don't even get that. There's never been a reason for it. I've never heard a logical reason that someone who was convicted of a felony should not be able to vote.
I wonder how this would play into some of your ideas, but for those who don't know, Virginia is a Dillon rules state, meaning localities can only do what the state explicitly allows. Would you support a home rule constitutional amendment to give cities like Alexandria more autonomy?
You got to think twice about that, Ryan, because I think as a member of the General Assembly, you do, on some level, I understand that you'd be representing people in the 5th District, and that's what I want to do, and that's the most important thing. But you're also in there thinking about the state of Virginia itself. And if you have the home rule, you're going to get into DEFCON 5 and some other localities when they make certain rules that are actually hurting people, and I don't, so therefore I'd be a little hesitant before I learned more about that. That's sort of like punting and only thinking about your own backyard. I'm not sure about that.
I forgot this one when we were talking about constitutional amendments, but a lot of questions about election reform, and people were wondering if you would change this, not you, but candidates, if they would change this process, as well as support maybe amendments to switch Virginia to even year elections or expand the legislative session beyond the current 60-day maximum. How can we do better?
Yeah, the 60-day maximum. So I just don't know enough about what that would do. I know quite a few General Assembly members. Maybe I don't know what would happen if they made it 60 days or not. So I'm not going to answer that, although I'd be glad to listen and, possibly that'd be good. I don't know. What was the first one?
Changing this process. The firehouse, the appointment, just this election whole process of 5-day campaigns.
Oh, yeah. I have to say, I didn't know about the concept of a firehouse election until recently. And I started thinking about running for office in general around the time of the last presidential election. But this coming up, Ryan, I've got a 1-month-old. I represent 2 people for murder right now, and I got a Fourth Circuit brief due Wednesday. But such is the times when it happens. It's also not very democratic, It seems more like a gotcha sort of thing. So, of course, I don't think it's right to have the firehouse election, It would be nice to have more time to put into it, but I just hope for the best and trying to get people out there who might think that, honestly, I have nothing bad to say about any elected officials in Alexandria that I've ever met, but I do think they're all the same people, and usually you see the same faces and names. I don't see what's wrong with changing it up, but it's almost like people think it's strange if someone runs for an office that hasn't been in that club for the last 15 years. So
I think that's a good, the place to go next is you're running against 3 other Democrats who share many of the same values, many of the same Democratic values. What distinguishes you from your opponents, and why should they vote for you on Tuesday?
I don't know all of my opponents. The person on the ballot that entered today, and I don't actually know anything about him. I don't know. I do know Mr. McPike. I like him. He's a great guy. So what distinguishes me, I have a completely different background. I'm somebody that fights in court. I'm a small business owner that has been very successful in that. I know all the things that have to do with owning your own business. I am used to fighting. I am used to being challenged. I am used to being afraid, and I'm used to not backing down. And I think that my unique experience is good for this. I'm also used to negotiating in very hard situations and doing well at it, and connecting with all kinds of people. Now, the type of experience someone has, whoever it is, who has been in the city council or the school board or whatever it is, I know a lot about history and how things might go, but I don't have that. And so maybe that's a disadvantage. I don't know. But if you have to have that to get elected, then I think that's a problem. And, there's a delegation, there's other people there, and bringing in new voices and new faces is good. Otherwise, it just seems like it's kind of a clique.
Yeah. Your website is Leibig for delegate.com. And what are we going to find there? Anything that we missed?
No, there's anybody that wants to really know more about me. If they look at my law firm website, it has a lot of history, press articles, things about me and that I've done. If in case anyone's interested, you could look at that too. And because it's a firehouse primary, Ryan, this website has been up for 48 hours. You know how it is.
We're all flying by the seat of our pants somehow. Yeah. Awesome. Well, was there anything that we didn't get to that you wanted to?
You've been more than generous. That was very nice of you to let me come on.
Yeah, of course. Trying to get everybody in here, and we're all working overtime to get out the vote as well as get out the information. So we wish you the very best of luck on Tuesday, and we'll see you out there with the family.
All right. See ya.
All right, and we thank Christopher for joining us. And again, his website is leibigfordelegate.com. If you missed any portion of this interview, want to watch it again, want to share it, all available on our website, alexandriabrief.com, as well as on our social media pages. And I'm turning all of these into a podcast in case you want to listen to them on the go while you make your way around tomorrow. Again, Firehouse Primary is on Tuesday for House District 5, and visit alexstems.org for the fancy map and look up your address to see where you're supposed to vote. Thanks for watching.